Have you ever stopped to think about how the smallest choices you make every single day quietly sculpt the person you become? That moment you choose patience over frustration, discipline over distraction, or kindness over indifference, they might seem insignificant in isolation, but together they form the bedrock of your character. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "Your habits will determine your quality of life." And he wasn't just talking about grand gestures or life-altering decisions. He meant those quiet, almost invisible moments where you decide who you want to be one action at a time. This is the heart of Stoicism, recognizing that true strength isn't just forged in crisis or triumph, but in the ordinary, everyday choices we barely notice. The way you respond to a delay, the effort you put into a task no one will praise, the thoughts you entertain when no one's watching, these are the silent architects of your character. And the unsettling truth, most of us go through our days completely unaware of how these micro-decisions shape us. We focus on the big milestones, the promotions, the relationships, the achievements, while the real work happens in the background, in those 30 seemingly minor choices we make without thinking. That's what we're uncovering today, because Stoicism teaches us that self-mastery begins with awareness. If you've ever wondered why some people radiate resilience, integrity, or calm in the face of chaos, it's not luck or genetics. It's the accumulation of those daily decisions, the ones they've learned to make deliberately. So let's pull back the curtain. Over the next 30 insights, we'll explore the subtle habits and choices that quietly define you, and how, with just a little more mindfulness, you can steer them toward the person you truly want to become. This isn't about overhauling your life overnight. It's about recognizing the power you already hold in the choices you're making right now. Think about the last time someone cut you off in traffic. Your chest tightened, your grip on the wheel clenched, maybe you even shouted something you'd never say face to face. In that split second, your brain defaulted to reaction. But here's the Stoic twist. Between the stimulus and your response, there's a hidden space of choice, and mastering that gap is where your character is quietly forged. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, put it bluntly, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." He called this the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing to examine your initial impressions before letting them dictate your behavior. Picture two people stuck in the same traffic jam. One spirals into honking and frustration, while the other takes a deep breath and uses the delay to listen to an audiobook. The external circumstance is identical, but the internal response transforms the experience. Modern psychology calls this cognitive reframing. The Stoics called it wisdom. Every day, you're handed dozens of these invisible forks in the road. A rude comment, a broken promise, a missed opportunity. The knee-jerk reaction might feel satisfying in the moment, but it's the pause, the deliberate response, that builds resilience over time. So here's a challenge. Before bed tonight, replay one moment where you reacted on autopilot. Maybe it was snapping at a coworker or refreshing your inbox obsessively. Now imagine inserting just a 3-second pause. What changes? That's the Stoic superpower, not eliminating emotions, but refusing to let them hijack your actions. Because those tiny pauses, they're the silent rehearsals for who you'll be when life really tests you. Consider how often we reflexively complain about the weather, the weight, the workload. It's almost automatic, like breathing. But Seneca, the Stoic thinker who advised emperors, saw this habit as a thief stealing our peace. He wrote, "A man's as miserable as he thinks he is," pointing to a radical idea. Gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a deliberate practice, a daily rebellion against negativity. While complaining shrinks your world to what's lacking, gratitude reveals hidden abundance, even in adversity. Take two people facing the same rainy commute. One grumbles about ruined shoes, the other notices how the rain nourishes the city's trees. The difference isn't circumstance, it's focus. The Stoics called this prosoph, or attention, training yourself to spot the good you'd otherwise overlook. Challenges don't disappear, but gratitude reframes them as teachers. A missed promotion, a chance to grow, a delayed flight, unplanned time to reflect. Seneca practiced this nightly, replaying his day to find lessons in even the smallest annoyances. Here's how to start. Each morning, before checking your phone or diving into tasks, list 3 specific things you're grateful for. Not vague platitudes like family, but concrete details: the way sunlight hits your coffee cup, a colleague's timely encouragement, even the discomfort of a workout reminding you of your body's strength. This ritual isn't about ignoring life's hardships, it's about balancing the scales. For every complaint, you've already deposited 3 reminders of resilience. The irony: complaining often feels cathartic but leaves you drained. Gratitude, though it takes effort, fuels momentum. Try it for a week. You'll notice something subtle but profound. The world hasn't changed, but your eyes have. As Seneca put it, he who has made a fair compact with poverty is rich. There's a peculiar paradox about comfort. The more we chase it, the more fragile we become. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Musonius Rufus, the teacher of Epictetus, put it plainly: how can someone become brave if they only seek what feels easy? He wasn't advocating for suffering for its own sake, but for something far more profound: voluntary discomfort as training for life's inevitable hardships. Imagine a boxer who only spars with opponents they can easily defeat. When a real challenge comes, they'll crumble. The same applies to your mind. Take cold showers. At first glance, it's just an unpleasant way to start the day, but the Stoic sees deeper. That moment when icy water hits your skin and every instinct screams to retreat, that's where resilience is born. By choosing discomfort, you're rehearsing for life's unexpected blows. When your project gets cancelled or your plans fall apart, you've already conditioned yourself to stay steady. The Roman Stoics called this ascesis, deliberate practice in adversity. Emperor Marcus Aurelius would sleep on the floor to remind himself luxury wasn't owed to him. Seneca ate stale bread and wore threadbare clothes periodically, not out of poverty, but to prove to himself he could endure it. Here's the key: it's not about punishing yourself. It's about revealing your own capacity. Every time you willingly step into discomfort, whether it's holding your tongue in an argument or taking the stairs instead of the elevator, you're depositing strength into an invisible bank account. Then, when life forces a withdrawal, you're not bankrupt. Modern research echoes this. Studies on Navy SEALs show that those who voluntarily expose themselves to manageable stressors perform better under real pressure. So here's your challenge today: pick one tiny, uncomfortable task and do it with full awareness. Skip the snooze button, walk without checking your phone. Drink your coffee black, notice the resistance, then move through it. As Musonius Rufus observed, just as steel is tempered by fire, so too is courage strengthened by hardship. The goal isn't to make life harder, but to prove to yourself that you're harder to break. Start small. The cold shower can wait, but the mindset that begins now. Epictetus opens his Enchiridion with a line that cuts to the core of human suffering. Some things are within our power, while others are not. At first glance, it seems obvious, until you catch yourself arguing with reality, wrestling with forces you'll never bend. The Stoic dichotomy of control isn't just philosophy, it's a litmus test for sanity. Every moment of frustration, the cancelled flight, the unfair criticism, the slow internet, is a silent rebellion against this simple truth. Picture this: two colleagues receive identical critical feedback. One obsesses over the manager's tone, replaying the conversation in loops of resentment. The other zeroes in on the single actionable suggestion buried in the critique. Both faced the same event, but only the second exercised what the Stoics called proherses, the power to choose where to direct their energy. The first is exhausted by noon, the second leaves the meeting energized. That's the dichotomy in motion. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. The locus of control concept shows that people who focus on their sphere of influence report higher resilience and lower stress. Traffic won't clear because you pound the steering wheel, but you can control whether that delay becomes a moment to listen to a podcast or a spiral of rage. The weather won't bend to your vacation plans, but you can choose to find beauty in unexpected rain. Here's the challenge: grab a notepad and draw two circles. Label the outer one, beyond me, are things like others' opinions, market crashes, past mistakes. The inner circle, within me, your effort, your values, your next response. Now think back on today. How much mental real estate did you lease to the outer circle? That's the Stoic wake-up call. Suffering multiplies when we mortgage our peace to what we can't change. Epictetus, born a slave, knew true freedom wasn't about altering externals but mastering internals. When his owner twisted his leg, he calmly remarked, "You'll break it." When the bone snapped, he added, "See, I told you so." That's extreme, but the principle remains. Your power lies not in what happens, but in what you do with it. So tonight, ask yourself, did I fight reality today, or did I focus on my response? The answer quietly defines your days and eventually your character. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal that became meditations, filled with reminders like this one. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. 2,000 years later, that paradox still stings. How many hours have you lost imagining what others think of your outfit, your work, your life choices? Social media turned this ancient struggle into a full-time job, every like a tiny hit of validation, every silence a potential rejection. But here's what the Stoics knew: chasing approval is like drinking salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. Consider two artists. One creates solely for the joy of expression, embracing imperfections as part of the process. The other obsesses over comments, tweaking their work to fit trends. Both might produce beautiful pieces, but only the first enjoys true freedom. The Stoics called this adiaphora, indifference to externals. Not apathy, but the wisdom to distinguish what's yours, to control your effort, your integrity from what isn't praise, blame, viral fame. When Marcus wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be one," he wasn't dismissing feedback. He was urging focus on the only audience that truly matters, the one inside your head. Modern psychology reveals why this is so hard. Our brains are wired for tribal belonging historically. Exclusion meant danger. But today, that primal fear hijacks us with phantom anxieties. That coworker's sidelong glance, your follow count, they feel life or death, but they're just echoes of an outdated survival script. The Stoic antidote: practice visibility without attachment. Post the thoughtful comment without refreshing for replies. Wear the bold outfit and notice how few actually react. Each time you act from integrity rather than expectation, you weaken approval's grip. Here's your challenge: pick one day to experiment with radical indifference. Before speaking or posting, ask, am I doing this for me or for them? If it's the latter, pause. Eat alone in public without scrolling to mask discomfort. Share an unpopular opinion calmly, like Epictetus, who said, "If someone speaks badly of you, remember that their words only have the power you give them." You'll discover a quiet truth: most people are too busy starring in their own dramas to scrutinize yours. The freedom you'll taste, that's what happens when you stop renting space in minds that were never yours to furnish. There's a reason Seneca began each day in silence long before sunrise. He called it preparing the mind to meet the flood of the day's events, not with resistance but with clarity. This wasn't passive meditation, it was active rehearsal. Picture a general surveying a map before battle, anticipating challenges and aligning resources. The Stoic morning ritual works the same way. Before the world floods your senses with demands, you carve out space to ask, what kind of person do I choose to be today? Not in abstract terms, but in concrete virtues: courage when a difficult conversation arises, patience when technology fails, justice when no one's watching. Modern life hijacks our mornings with screens and urgency, but the Stoics knew this secret. The first hour shapes the remaining 16. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations at dawn, not as lofty philosophy, but as practical armor. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Not to breed cynicism, but to inoculate against surprise. By anticipating friction, he could meet it with equanimity instead of outrage. Here's how to adapt this today. Keep a notebook by your bed. Each morning, before reaching for your phone, write down one virtue to embody, not a vague ideal like "be better," but a specific quality tied to real challenges ahead. Maybe it's composure before a high-stakes meeting, or generosity when your coworker takes credit for your idea. Seneca advised, rehearse in your mind, this is what happens and this is how I handle it. That's the power of morning reflection. It turns virtues from concepts into tools. The twist: this ritual works because it's small. You're not overhauling your entire character. You're focusing on a single thread woven through the day's fabric. When the driver cuts you off, instead of autopilot rage, you remember today's virtue, patience. When your child interrupts your work, you pause. Presence was today's intention. Like a musician practicing scales, these daily micro-rehearsals build the muscle memory of character. Try it for 3 days. The first morning, you might forget your virtue by breakfast. The second, you'll catch yourself mid-reaction and course correct. By the third, you'll start noticing opportunities to practice before they arise. That's the Stoic magic. Awareness precedes mastery. As Seneca wrote, no wind favors the sailor who has no destined port. Your morning ritual isn't about controlling the day, it's about steering you. Marcus Aurelius ended his days not with mindless scrolling or numbing entertainment, but with a practice so simple yet profound that it became the foundation of his legendary meditations. As candles flickered in the quiet hours, he'd revisit the day's events with ruthless honesty, not to judge himself, but to distill wisdom. When the light has gone out, he wrote, and my wife is asleep, I examine the entire day. This wasn't mere diary keeping, it was surgery on his own soul. The Stoics called this evening review, and it's where growth crystallizes from the raw material of daily life. Imagine 2 people ending identical days. One collapses onto the couch, letting the hours blur into oblivion. The other spends 10 minutes asking 2 questions. What did today teach me? And where did I fall short of my ideals? The first wakes the next morning no wiser. The second, they've turned experience into insight. Seneca described this ritual as digesting the day, extracting nutrients from even bitter moments. A frustrating meeting becomes a lesson in patience. A missed opportunity highlights where preparation fell short. Even small victories, choosing kindness when tired, resisting gossip are noted, reinforcing neural pathways for next time. Here's how to practice it. Keep a notebook by your bed. Marcus preferred wax tablets. Your phone's notes app works too. Start with 3 bullet points, not a novel, just key moments. Then apply the Stoic triple filter. First, what did I control in this situation? This separates responsibility from helplessness. Second, what virtue could I have practiced? Maybe it was courage to speak up or humility to listen. Third, what's one tiny adjustment for tomorrow? Not a grand resolution, but a single, actionable tweak. The magic lies in specificity. Instead of "I was impatient," note, "When my colleague repeated their point, I interrupted. Next time, I'll count to 3 before responding." This transforms vague guilt into precise growth. Epictetus warned, "Progress isn't measured by how many books you read, but by how you live each hour." The evening review makes that measurable. Try this for a week. You'll notice 2 shifts. First, you'll start catching yourself during the day. This will make an interesting reflection tonight, which subtly elevates your choices. Second, you'll spot patterns. Maybe mornings are your weak point, or certain triggers consistently derail your calm. That's the Stoic advantage. Awareness precedes mastery. As Marcus wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Your nightly review is the dye that shapes your character, one examined day at a time. Seneca once wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." 2,000 years later, his words cut deeper than ever, not because we lack time, but because we've fragmented what we have into a million distracted pieces. The average person checks their phone 96 times a day, switching tasks every 3 minutes. We call this productivity. The Stoics would call it slow-motion self-sabotage. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a radical idea. Focus isn't just a skill, it's a moral act. When Marcus Aurelius commanded himself to concentrate every minute like a Roman, he wasn't discussing time management. He was describing prosoch, the discipline of attention. In a world where multitasking is worn as a badge of honor, the Stoics whisper the uncomfortable truth: scattering your focus is stealing from your future self. Every time you split your attention between a conversation and your inbox, between a book and buzzing notifications, you're not just losing minutes, you're diluting your capacity for depth, the very thing that makes work meaningful and life rich. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. Studies at Stanford reveal that chronic multitaskers perform worse on cognitive tests than their focused counterparts. Their brains literally rewire to crave distraction. Contrast this with deep work, that state of uninterrupted concentration where your best thinking emerges. It's no coincidence that history's most prolific creators, from Seneca to Darwin, protected their focus ruthlessly. They understood what we've forgotten. Time isn't just passing, it's being traded. That quick social media check, you're not borrowing time, you're bartering fragments of your potential. Here's the Stoic challenge. For 1 hour today, practice monotasking, the ancient art of doing one thing wholeheartedly. Drink your coffee without scrolling. Walk without headphones when your mind begs for distraction, and it will notice the urge like a scientist observing an experiment, that itch to switch tabs or refresh feeds. That's your brain's resistance to depth. As Seneca warned, we are tight-fisted with property and money, yet think too little of wasting time, the one thing about which we should all be the toughest misers. The irony, we fear missing out on trivial updates while missing the chance to build something lasting, whether it's a meaningful project or a more attentive version of yourself. Next time your phone buzzes, ask, is this interruption worth a piece of my focus, my character, my life? The answer might surprise you. Epictetus had a blunt warning about careless speech. You are what you habitually say. He wasn't just talking about lying or harsh words, he meant the subtle erosion of character that happens when we speak without thought. The Stoics saw words as more than communication. They were mirrors reflecting our inner discipline. Every complaint, every piece of gossip, every offhand criticism is a tiny chisel shaping who we become. Consider two co-workers at lunch. One dissects their manager's flaws in vivid detail, savoring the shared irritation. The other steers the conversation toward a book that changed their perspective. Both walk away feeling connection, but only one leaves strengthened. That's the Stoic distinction. Speech either drains or nourishes. Gossip might bond people temporarily through shared negativity, but meaningful dialogue builds enduring respect for others and for yourself. Marcus Aurelius journaled this reminder. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? He wasn't advocating silence, but intentionality. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies show complaining rewires the brain toward negativity, while purposeful conversation boosts empathy and problem-solving skills. The difference isn't the topic, it's the aim. Discussing challenges to find solutions, that's Stoic. Venting just to reinforce frustration, that's emotional junk food. Epictetus put it starkly, if your words aren't more honest than silence, keep quiet. Here's the challenge for one day, treat speech like a limited resource. Before speaking, pass your words through 3 Stoic filters. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? You'll notice how often we default to criticism disguised as concern. I'm just being honest, or gossip framed as updates. Did you hear about? Try replacing complaints with observations. Instead of, this traffic is unbearable, try, I'm using this delay to practice patience. The transformation won't happen in a day. Even Seneca admitted struggling with gossip's allure, but awareness is the first step. As you notice the weight your words carry, you'll start choosing them like a sculptor selects tools, knowing each one leaves a mark. That's the Stoic secret. Your speech doesn't just describe your character, it builds it one sentence at a time. Marcus Aurelius observed a profound truth while studying nature. The fig tree produces figs, and if it doesn't, it dies. But the wise person produces wisdom, and if they don't, they still live. What a fortunate thing it is to bear fruit, but also to have the choice to keep trying. In that observation lies a radical embrace of imperfection, not as failure, but as part of the natural order. The Stoics didn't preach perfectionism, they practiced realism. A fig tree isn't ashamed when its fruit isn't flawless, nor does the river apologize for bending around rocks. Yet we torture ourselves over every misstep, every unrealized ideal, as if being human were a defect rather than a design feature. Consider 2 people learning a new skill. One berates themselves for each stumble, abandoning the pursuit when mastery doesn't arrive overnight. The other celebrates small progress, knowing that even the greatest musicians once fumbled scales. The difference isn't talent, it's the willingness to coexist with imperfection while still moving forward. Seneca captured this when he wrote, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless it withstands frequent winds." Growth requires weathering awkward phases, not avoiding them. Modern psychology echoes this. Studies on perfectism paralysis show that those who tolerate early clumsiness learn faster than those demanding instant excellence. Here's where Stoicism diverges from modern self-help cliches. It doesn't suggest ignoring flaws or settling for mediocrity. Instead, it offers a third path, clear-eyed acceptance paired with steady effort. Imagine a potter shaping clay. They don't curse the material for being uneven, they work with its inherent texture, guiding it toward form without denying its nature. That's the Stoic approach to self-improvement. Marcus often reminded himself, "You're made of worse material than you'd like, but does that mean you should lower your standards or rise to meet them despite it?" This extends to others too. Epictetus advised, when someone irritates you, remember they're acting according to their nature, just as you are. That co-worker who talks too loudly. The relative stuck in their ways, they're like trees growing at different angles, some bent by storms, others stunted by poor soil. Resisting their nature only exhausts you. Understanding it frees you to respond wisely. So here's your challenge today. Identify one imperfection in yourself or someone else and meet it with stoic compassion. Maybe it's your tendency to procrastinate, reframed as your mind's way of seeking meaningful work. Perhaps it's a friend's blunt honesty, seen not as rudeness but as unfiltered authenticity. As Marcus wrote, the olive's bitterness is part of its essence, yet we still value its oil. Your flaws aren't obstacles to your character, they're the raw material from which it's forged. The question isn't how to erase them, but how to work with them as nature intended. Seneca once observed, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That craving, the itch for immediate satisfaction, is perhaps the quietest thief of character in our modern age. The Stoics called this enkrateia, the mastery over desires, and they saw it not as deprivation but as liberation. Every time you pause before clicking buy now, every moment you choose a book over another episode, you're not just resisting temptation, you're reinforcing the neural pathways of self-command. Modern science confirms this. Studies on delayed gratification, like the famous marshmallow test, reveal that those who can wait for greater rewards tend to achieve more in life. But the Stoics took it further. For them, temperance wasn't about future payoff, it was about present sovereignty. Consider the difference between binge watching and intentional viewing. One leaves you with a foggy mind and a vague sense of lost time. The other, where you savor an episode like a fine meal, fully present, becomes an exercise in mindfulness. The content might be identical, but the experience transforms based on your approach. Seneca warned, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." How often do we exaggerate the discomfort of waiting? That chocolate bar you need now, the impulse purchase that promises happiness. The Stoic asks, what's the real cost of surrendering to this? Not just the money or calories, but the erosion of your willpower, one small compromise at a time. Here's the practice today. Pick one harmless pleasure and deliberately delay it. Finish your work before checking social media. Walk past the bakery without stopping. The goal isn't to punish yourself, but to witness your own rational mind overriding primal urges. As Seneca wrote, no man is free who is not master of himself. Each time you pause, you prove that desires are suggestions, not commands. Start small. The muscle of restraint strengthens with repetition. Tomorrow's challenges won't feel as daunting when you've already tamed today's impulses. Marcus Aurelius faced barbarian invasions, political betrayals, and chronic illness. Yet his private writings reveal a man who saw each disaster as raw material for growth. The impediment to action advances action, he wrote. What stands in the way becomes the way. This wasn't naive optimism. It was alchemy transforming leaden setbacks into golden wisdom. Consider Thomas Edison's famous response when asked about his 10,000 failed attempts to invent the light bulb. "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's stoicism in action, not denying reality, but reframing it so thoroughly that the obstacle itself becomes the teacher. History's most resilient minds share this trait. When Beethoven's hearing faded, he composed his greatest symphonies by sawing the legs off his piano and pressing his head to the floor to feel vibrations. Paralysis confined Frida Kahlo to bed, where she painted masterpieces on a specially designed easel. These weren't just comebacks, they were metamorphoses where limitation birthed innovation. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate, not passive acceptance but active engagement with whatever life hands you. As Seneca observed while exiled to Corsica, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that people who cognitively process adversity, asking "what can this teach me?" rather than "why me?" develop greater emotional resilience. A missed promotion becomes a chance to reassess priorities. A broken relationship reveals hidden patterns. Even physical pain, as Marcus noted during his chronic illness, can school us in patience and self-awareness. The key lies in shifting from victim to student, a transformation as subtle as it is profound. Here's the practice. Recall a recent setback, a rejected proposal, a botched presentation, a personal misstep. Now apply the Stoic triage. First, separate what you controlled, your preparation, your attitude, from what you didn't, the outcome, others' reactions. Second, mine the experience for one concrete lesson. Maybe you underestimated preparation time or overlooked feedback. Third, design a tiny experiment to apply that insight today. Edison didn't just philosophize about failure, he methodically eliminated variables. That's the difference between dwelling and growing, the paradox. We admire resilience in others but resist its tuition when the bill comes due. Yet, as Epictetus, who turned slavery into wisdom, reminded us, difficulties show men what they are. Your darkest hour might be the forge where your strongest self is hammered into being. So tonight, ask not just what went wrong, but what became possible because it did. That shift in perspective doesn't erase the sting, it makes it meaningful. The Stoics were among history's first cosmopolitans, not in the modern sense of jet-setters, but as citizens of the world who saw humanity as a single family. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of Rome's vast empire, wrote in his private journal, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." This wasn't poetic flourish, it was a radical ethic for its time. While most ancient philosophies drew lines between us and them, the Stoics practiced what hierarchs called the circles of concern, imagining each person as standing at the center of concentric rings, from self and family to community, strangers, and finally all humankind. The work of wisdom, to consciously draw those circles inward, treating the outer rings with the same care we reserve for the inner ones. Consider the airport traveler who sighs loudly when a confused elderly passenger slows the security line. The indifferent mind sees an obstacle, the Stoic sees a fellow human deserving patience. That shift from irritation to empathy isn't just moral posturing. Neuroscience reveals that acts of kindness activate the same brain regions as receiving rewards. The Roman Stoics understood this intuitively. Helping others isn't charity, it's mutual nourishment. When Seneca advised, "Wherever there is a human being, there's an opportunity for kindness," he wasn't preaching saintliness, he was outlining practical psychology. The barrister who remembers your order, the neighbor who carries your groceries, these tiny connections aren't just niceties. They're threads weaving the fabric of collective resilience. Modern life tempts us with the luxury of indifference. We scroll past suffering, mute uncomfortable conversations, and rationalize inaction with "not my problem." But the Stoics warned that indifference is a slow poison. Epictetus, born into slavery, taught that no one is free while others suffer unjustly. Not because we're responsible for all wrongs, but because ignoring them shrinks our own humanity. Picture two commuters. One plugs into noise-canceling headphones to avoid a crying child. The other offers the parent a knowing smile and helps fold their stroller. Both arrive at the same destination, but one has practiced what the Stoics called sympatheia, the interdependence of all things. Here's your challenge today. Perform one act of deliberate kindness for a stranger. Not grand gestures, subtle ones. Pay for the coffee behind you. Hand your umbrella to someone waiting in the rain. The Stoic twist: do it anonymously when possible. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, when you've done well and another has benefited, why seek a third thing, recognition or reward? That's the litmus test. Kindness that expects nothing in return is character building. Kindness that craves applause is performance. The paradox: the more we practice this, the more we notice something startling. Strangers begin feeling less strange. The homeless veteran, the frazzled single parent, the immigrant struggling with language hierarchical circles contract naturally. And in that contraction lies a quiet revolution, the realization that kindness isn't something we occasionally do, but who we become through daily practice. As Seneca observed, no one can live happily who looks only to themselves. The path to your best self might just begin with holding the door for someone you'll never see again. Epictetus posed a simple yet piercing question to his students. If you were to write down what you truly value, would your daily actions match that list? Most of us would hesitate before answering honestly. There's a quiet tension between what we claim to cherish and how we actually spend our time, between the person we aspire to be and the choices we make when no one's watching. The Stoics called this tension proherses, the alignment of actions with principles. It's not about grand declarations of virtue, but the mundane moments where long-term values clash with short-term cravings. Take the modern dilemma of career versus passion. One path offers stability, promotions, and a comfortable retirement. The other whispers of creative fulfillment but carries uncertainty. Society applauds the first and romanticizes the second, but the Stoic asks a different question: which aligns with your arete, your highest potential? Not in terms of money or fame, but in terms of waking up each morning with integrity. Marcus Aurelius could have indulged in imperial luxuries, yet he chose the discipline of philosophy. Not because it was easy, but because it resonated with his core belief. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. The friction point. Short-term desires are loud. They bang on the door of your attention with urgent intensity. A tempting job offer with a higher salary but empty work. An extra hour scrolling when you vowed to write. The Stoics recognized this imbalance. Seneca observed, men are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful. We protect our phones with cases and our savings with budgets, yet let our most precious resource, attention, leak away on trivialities. Here's the litmus test. Imagine your future self looking back at today. Will they be grateful you binge-watched that series, or that you spent 90 minutes working on your neglected novel? The difference isn't in the activity itself, but in its alignment with your deepest values. Epictetus warned, you are not your body or possessions, you are your choices. Every time you prioritize what's easy over what's meaningful, you're not just postponing a goal. You're rehearsing the identity of someone who settles. So pause and ask, what's one long-term aspiration you've been sidelining? Maybe it's learning a language, repairing a relationship, or building a side project. Now identify the daily micro-choice that's keeping it dormant. Is it 20 minutes sacrificed to social media that could be spent practicing the avoidance of an uncomfortable conversation? The Stoic solution isn't dramatic upheaval, it's redirecting existing time. As Seneca wrote, life is long enough if you know how to use it. The hours are already there. The question is whether you'll invest them or spend them. This week, conduct a simple audit. Carry a notepad and tally how often you choose instant gratification over enduring value. Don't judge, just observe. You'll uncover a startling truth. The barrier to your long-term goals isn't time or talent. It's the accumulation of unexamined moments where you traded what matters most for what mattered right then. The good news: awareness is the first step toward realignment. Every time you catch yourself drifting off course, remember Epictetus's reminder. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. The gap between those two isn't a failure. It's the space where character is built. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius with an unusual suggestion. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition I feared?" This wasn't pessimism, it was a mental training exercise the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Imagine a fire drill for the soul, where you rehearse potential hardships not to dwell on misery, but to disarm fear of the unknown. The modern mind often confuses this with toxic positivity or morbid fixation, but the Stoic approach is neither. It's about removing the element of surprise from adversity so you can meet it with clarity rather than panic. Picture two business owners before an economic downturn. One has mentally prepared for market fluctuations, visualizing strategies to pivot and adapt. The other, refusing to entertain negative possibilities, freezes when revenues drop. The first has practiced Stoic negative visualization. The second is experiencing it unprepared. Ancient Stoics would walk through crowded markets imagining insults to test their equanimity. Roman generals held victory parades with a slave whispering in their ear, "Remember, you are mortal." These weren't exercises in gloom, they were vaccinations against the shock of reality. Here's how to practice this today. Each morning, ask yourself what's the worst that could happen today, not as an anxious spiral, but as a strategic brainstorm. Your phone shatters, you've already visualized keeping calm and using your backup plan. A project gets cancelled, you've mentally rehearsed redirecting your energy. The power lies in specificity. Don't just think bad things, but play out the scenario step by step. How would you respond? What resources would you tap? Seneca advised, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." Try this with minor inconveniences first. Visualize spilling coffee on your shirt before an important meeting. Now imagine your response: not frustration, but problem solving. Keep a spare shirt at work or laugh it off as a human moment. Modern psychology validates this. Studies on stress inoculation show that mentally rehearsing challenges reduces their emotional impact when they occur. Navy SEAL use similar techniques, visualizing mission failures to stay composed during actual crises. The paradox: by regularly visiting hypothetical hardships, you visit actual suffering less often. Those who have imagined losing possessions cherish what they have more deeply. Those who have contemplated mortality waste less time on trivial grievances. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That gratitude wasn't accidental. It was cultivated by regularly facing life's fragility in his mind's eye. Tonight, take 5 minutes to write down 3 worst-case scenarios for tomorrow, from mundane traffic jam to significant job rejection. Next to each, note one rational response. You'll discover something remarkable. Most feared outcomes lose their fangs when examined in daylight. The Stoic doesn't avoid shadows, they bring a lantern to see they're just shapes. That's the gift of negative visualization, not fearing storms, but learning to sail in all weather. Epictetus, who spent his youth in slavery, offered perhaps history's most piercing antidote to envy. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things he has not, but rejoices for those he has. Imagine if that mindset could be bottled and sold today. We'd call it a miracle drug. Instead, we live in an age where comparison isn't just a habit, it's an industry. Social media feeds are engineered to make us measure our raw, unfiltered lives against someone else's highlight reel. The Stoics didn't have Instagram, but they understood this universal human trap 2,000 years ago. When Epictetus warned, "If you wish to be content, compare your condition to those less fortunate," he wasn't advocating schadenfreude. He was prescribing perspective, the kind that transforms "I want" into "I have enough." Consider two friends scrolling through their phones. One feels a sinking weight seeing vacation photos from an acquaintance, their own life suddenly seeming dull in contrast. The other pauses, remembering Epictetus's question, "Does the sun envy the moon because it shines differently?" This shift isn't about denying ambition or settling for mediocrity. It's about distinguishing between inspiration, which lifts you, and comparison, which quietly erodes your peace. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies show social media use correlates with depression when it fuels upward comparison, measuring yourself against those better off, but boosts well-being when it fosters connection. The content hasn't changed, your focus has. The Stoics took this further. They practiced autarkeia, self-sufficiency, not in possessions but in spirit. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial power, wrote, "Be like the rocky headland against which the waves break. It stands firm and the waters fall still around it." That's the opposite of today's reactive mindset, where another's promotion can sour your mood, or a friend's new car can make your faithful old sedan suddenly feel inadequate. The rocky headland doesn't resent the waves, it simply exists undisturbed by their motion. Here's where it gets practical. That acquaintance whose curated success stories leave you feeling lacking. The Stoic wouldn't tell you to suppress the feeling or judge it. They'd invite you to examine the underlying belief. If they have more, I must have less. That's the illusion. Another's good fortune doesn't diminish yours any more than a candle loses light when another is lit. Epictetus put it bluntly, freedom isn't secured by filling your coffers, but by emptying your greed. So here's your challenge. Open your social media right now and unfollow one account, just one, that consistently triggers comparison, not out of resentment but clarity. Maybe it's the influencer whose perfect mornings make your rushed routine feel inadequate, or the colleague whose career milestones amplify your self-doubt. Replace it with an account that aligns with your definition of enough, whether it's a philosopher's quotes, nature photography, or a community sharing simple living tips. This isn't avoidance, it's curating your mental environment as thoughtfully as you'd stock your pantry. The irony, those we envy often envy others themselves. The executive wishes they had the artist's freedom. The artist covets the executive's stability. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his time, journaled reminders like, "Don't waste the rest of your time here worrying about what others are doing." If even an emperor needed that advice, perhaps we all do. Your journey isn't theirs, and their path isn't yours to walk. As Seneca wrote, "No wind is favorable if you don't know your port." Comparison doesn't just steal joy, it obscures your unique destination. Today, choose to navigate by your own stars. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, often reminded his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just clever wordplay, it was a radical prescription for wisdom in a world where everyone competes to be heard. The Stoics saw listening not as passive silence, but as active engagement, a discipline as rigorous as any meditation or workout. In an age of podcasts, TED Talks, and endless hot takes, we've turned communication into a performance art, measuring our worth by how many opinions we voice rather than how deeply we absorb. But true understanding, the Stoics argued, begins when we stop rehearsing our next line and start receiving what's being offered. Think of the last conversation you had. Were you truly listening or just waiting for your turn to speak? Modern neuroscience reveals that when we're formulating responses while someone talks, our prefrontal cortex, the center of reasoning, actually dampens auditory processing. In other words, the harder you work to craft a clever reply, the less you actually hear. The Stoics anticipated this centuries ago. Epictetus taught, "You can't learn what you think you already know." That's why active listening requires humility, the willingness to entertain the possibility that the person across from you, whether a CEO or a janitor, might hold a piece of truth you've missed. Consider two colleagues discussing a project. One interrupts constantly, eager to showcase their expertise. The other leans in, asks clarifying questions, and notices the subtle frustrations in their partner's tone. By meeting's end, the interrupter leaves with superficial agreement, while the listener uncovers unspoken concerns that could derail everything. That's the Stoic edge. Listening isn't just about courtesy, it's about gathering intelligence on the human condition. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial authority, journaled this reminder: "From my brother Severus, I learned to listen patiently even to those who speak poorly." Why? Because every voice, however unpolished, carries data about needs, fears, and unseen connections. Here's the practice. Next time you're in conversation, treat it like a meditation. When the urge to interrupt arises, and it will notice it like a passing cloud, try counting 3 full seconds after someone finishes before responding. You'll discover something startling. Those pauses often prompt the speaker to reveal their most valuable thoughts, the ones they initially held back. Seneca observed, "Speech is the mirror of the mind, but only if the mind has space to reflect. Your silence isn't empty, it's the canvas on which others paint their truest selves." The paradox: in a world that equates talking with power, the deepest influence often belongs to those who listen with full presence. A parent who hears the unspoken anxiety behind a child's rebellion. A leader who detects the quiet dissent in a team's forced consensus. As Zeno implied, our anatomy holds the secret. We're designed not to broadcast, but to receive, then respond with the precision of an archer who draws the bow only after clearly seeing the target. Your next great insight might not come from another podcast or book, but from the person in front of you, waiting to be truly heard. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into wisdom, left us with a razor-sharp principle: when you blame others, you give up your power to change. That single sentence cuts through the fog of victimhood like sunlight through smoke. Stoic accountability isn't about self-punishment or accepting unfair blame. It's about reclaiming agency in a world that constantly whispers, "It's not your fault." Imagine two employees facing the same missed deadline. One spends the afternoon compiling excuses: the unreliable vendor, the unclear instructions, the traffic that made them late. The other starts their analysis with, "Where did I contribute to this outcome?" The first remains stuck in resentment. The second uncovers 3 ways to prevent repeat failures. Both experienced the same event, but only one walked away stronger. This distinction between fault and responsibility is where Stoicism shines. Fault looks backward, assigning guilt like a courtroom drama. Responsibility looks forward, asking, "What's mine to fix?" When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action," he wasn't denying life's unfairness. He was highlighting how every obstacle contains hidden leverage points. Your coworker may truly have dropped the ball. The weather might have ruined your outdoor event, but the Stoic asks, "Where's my sphere of influence in this mess?" Maybe it's setting clearer expectations next time or creating a rain backup plan. Modern psychology validates this approach. Studies on internal locus of control, show that people who focus on their response ability, literally, the ability to respond, report higher motivation and life satisfaction than those stuck in blame cycles. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Taking ownership often means confronting our own complicity in problems we'd rather attribute to others. That strained relationship. Maybe it's not just their stubbornness, perhaps your communication has been passive-aggressive. The failed project, sure, the team was disorganized, but did you speak up when you first noticed the cracks? Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery begins with brutal honesty about our contributions to the situations we lament. Try this reframe. Picture your current frustration as a tangled knot. Blame obsesses over who twisted the ropes. Responsibility looks for the first loose thread you can pull. Your neighbor's loud parties are disruptive, but have you actually had a civil conversation about it? The education system failed to teach you financial literacy, but what's stopping you from reading one personal finance article this week? This isn't about excusing others' shortcomings, it's about refusing to be held hostage by them. Tonight, conduct a simple audit. Write down one recurring problem in your life, then complete this sentence. I may not have caused this, but I can influence it by. That shift in focus from what's been done to you to what you can do is the essence of Stoic accountability. As Seneca observed while exiled on Corsica, a gem cannot be polished without friction. Your problems aren't just obstacles, they're the whetstone against which your character sharpens. The question isn't whether life will test you, it's whether you'll use those tests to grow or simply groan. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, slept on a thin mattress and ate simple meals, not because he couldn't afford luxury, but because he refused to let comfort become necessity. It is not the man who has too little, he wrote, but the man who craves more who is poor. That's the heart of Stoic minimalism, not deprivation, but deliberate detachment. Imagine two households, one filled with gadgets still in their boxes, closets overflowing with unworn clothes, and countertops buried under trinkets. The other holds only what's used and cherished. The difference isn't just aesthetic, it's psychological. Clutter isn't merely physical, it's cognitive. Every unused item whispers of wasted money, unmade decisions, and the mental energy spent navigating excess. The Stoics recognized this centuries before modern neuroscience confirmed that visual chaos increases cortisol levels while simplicity fosters focus. This philosophy extends beyond possessions. Consider how many digital subscriptions go unused, how many commitments drain energy without adding value, how many relationships linger from obligation rather than joy. Seneca warned, until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are. That's the paradox of abundance. The more we accumulate, the less we appreciate. A child with 3 toys plays deeply. One with 30 grows restless, bouncing between options without satisfaction. The Stoics called this euthymia, tranquility, born not from having everything, but from needing very little. Here's where modern minimalism often misses the mark. It's not about counting items or aesthetic Instagram feeds. It's about interrogating every possession, habit, and relationship with one question: does this serve my purpose? Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, wore simple robes and reminded himself, very little is needed to make a happy life. Contrast this with today's consumer culture, where shopping has become therapy and storage units a billion-dollar industry. The average home contains over 300,000 items, yet we still feel something's missing. The Stoic antidote, subtraction as liberation. Practical application starts small. Today, find one object you haven't used in the past year, a jacket, a kitchen gadget, a half-empty notebook, and donate it. not as charity but as training. Notice the resistance that arises, but what if I need it someday? That's attachment masquerading as practicality. Seneca challenged this directly. He who fears he'll lack will always lack. The exercise isn't about the item, it's about confronting the fear that fuels accumulation. The deeper lesson: minimalism isn't a lifestyle trend, it's mental armor. When you own little, you're less afraid of loss. When your schedule has white space, you gain room to think. When your relationships are few but meaningful, you're insulated from gossip's distractions. As Seneca advised his wealthy friend Lucilius, set aside certain days for plain living to prove poverty isn't miserable. That proof doesn't come from theory, but from practice. The jacket you donate today teaches more about freedom than any philosophical treatise, because true wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by what you can walk away from without looking back. Marcus Aurelius watched the sun rise over Rome each morning with the same steady rhythm, never rushing, never hesitating. In his private writings, he observed, "Time is like a river made up of events which rush along, but the stream is patience itself." That's the Stoic secret. Endurance isn't just waiting, it's aligning yourself with time's natural pace rather than wrestling against it. Picture two drivers stuck in the same traffic jam. One white-knuckles the wheel, muttering at red lights as if they're personal insults. The other exhales, noticing how sunlight filters through the windshield, turning the delay into an unexpected pocket of stillness. The circumstance is identical, but the experience transforms based on one variable: the willingness to let life unfold at its own speed. Modern neuroscience reveals why patience feels so unnatural. Our brains are wired for immediate rewards, a leftover survival mechanism from when quick reactions meant avoiding predators. Today, that same wiring turns minor delays into frustration grenades. The Stoics anticipated this tension centuries ago. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming a philosopher, taught, "No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig." His point: impatience isn't just unpleasant, it's irrational. You wouldn't yank a seedling from the soil because it's not yet a tree, yet we often rage against the gradual progress of our own growth, relationships, or careers. Consider the checkout line at the grocery store. That sigh when the person ahead digs for exact change. The mental tally of seconds wasted. That's not time management, it's resistance to the present moment. The Stoic approach flips the script. Standing in line becomes practice in presence. Notice the rhythm of breathing. Observe the colors of product packaging. These aren't distractions from waiting, they're invitations into what's already here. Seneca, who watched Rome's elite squander their lives chasing tomorrow, wrote, "The greatest waste of life is postponement." Not because we should hurry, but because we mistake anticipation for living. Here's the litmus test. Recall a recent moment when impatience flared. Maybe a slow-loading web page or a friend running late. Now ask, did rushing actually change the outcome? The traffic light won't turn green faster because you tap your foot. The download won't speed up because you refresh repeatedly. What if, instead of resisting the delay, you treated it as a micro-course in Stoic endurance? That's the hidden curriculum in life's waiting rooms, each one a chance to practice what Marcus called the art of acquiescence, the graceful acceptance of time's sovereignty. The paradox: by surrendering to slowness, you often gain more than you lose. The chef who lets broth simmer develops deeper flavors. The writer who drafts slowly discovers richer metaphors. Even nature insists on dormant seasons before bloom. As Marcus reflected while governing an empire, all things come into being and pass away through the ordinance of time. Your impatience won't hasten the sunrise, but your patience might help you finally see its colors. Seneca once described anger as brief insanity, a fire that burns the vessel holding it. That visceral image cuts to the heart of why Stoics saw forgiveness not as weakness, but as urgent self-preservation. Picture carrying a burning coal in your bare hand, waiting to throw it at someone else. The longer you hold on, the deeper the sear marks. Modern grudges work the same way. That co-worker who undermined you last year, the relative who forgot your birthday, we nurse these wounds like prized possessions, unaware they're actually weights dragging through our days. The Stoic alternative: treat forgiveness like removing a splinter swiftly, cleanly, before infection sets in. History offers a striking contrast. While most Roman emperors executed rivals and held lifelong vendettas, Marcus Aurelius pardoned the senator who conspired against him, even promoting him later. Not from naivety, but from cold calculation. He knew resentment would poison his own judgment more than any enemy could. Modern science validates this. Studies on forgiveness show that those who release grudges experience lower blood pressure, improved sleep, and stronger immune function. The person you're angry with might never know, but your body certainly does. Here's the Stoic reframe: forgiveness isn't about excusing behavior or reconciling with toxic people. It's about reclaiming your mental real estate from someone who's been living there rent-free. Imagine your mind as a courtroom. Every grudge is a trial where you're simultaneously judge, jury, and imprisoned defendant, replaying the same testimony, the same verdict, the same sentence. Forgiveness isn't acquittal. It's dismissing the case entirely to free up the docket for more pressing matters. Try this today. Identify one lingering resentment, even minor. Maybe it's the friend who forgot your coffee date or the driver who stole your parking spot. Now apply Seneca's razor. Does this matter in the context of my life's purpose? If not, release it with the indifference of dropping a pebble from your pocket. For heavier grudges, borrow Epictetus's perspective. They acted according to their flawed understanding. Why be shocked? This isn't absolution, it's recognizing that hurt people hurt people. The final test: picture your deathbed. Will this grievance even register among your life's meaningful moments? As Marcus wrote on the Germanic front lines, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Your peace is too valuable to mortgage to past wounds. Whoever comes to mind right now, that's your assignment, not for their sake, but for yours. The coal is still in your hand. Feel its heat, then let it fall. Epictetus drew a line in the sand with his students. If someone speaks badly of someone else, don't just refuse to participate, refuse to entertain it in your mind. That's Stoic integrity in speech taken to its radical extreme. Gossip isn't just words exchanged over cubicle walls. It's mental clutter that clouds judgment and erodes trust. Think of the last time someone shared a salacious tidbit about a colleague. The momentary thrill of being in the know, followed by the vague unease of carrying someone else's unresolved tension. The Stoics saw this chain reaction clearly. When you pass judgment through gossip, you're not just describing a person, you're shaping how others perceive them, and more subtly, how you perceive yourself. Take the modern workplace. That whispered conversation about the manager's divorce or the intern's promotion might seem harmless, even bonding. But here's what's silently transmitted: an unspoken agreement that people are fair game when they're not present. Marcus Aurelius warned, "What injures the hive injures the bee." Every piece of gossip is a tiny rupture in collective trust, the kind that makes teams second-guess confidentiality and individuals self-censor unnecessarily. Research from Stanford reveals that workplaces with high gossip levels suffer measurable drops in collaboration, as employees start assuming their words will be distorted in their absence. The Stoic alternative: follow Epictetus's three filters. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If any answer is no, the conversation ends there. The deeper challenge isn't just avoiding gossip, it's rewiring our fascination with it. Ancient Stoics practiced prosouch attention to mental impressions, recognizing how easily we're drawn to drama like moths to flame. Seneca observed that people would rather discuss others' flaws than examine their own because it's less confronting. Next time you're tempted to speculate about why a coworker left early, try this reframe. What if that mental energy was redirected toward your own priorities? That's the Stoic pivot, turning judgment into curiosity and curiosity into self-improvement. Here's your challenge for one day: treat every person as if they're standing invisibly beside you. Before mentioning someone's name, imagine them hearing your words directly. You'll quickly notice how much routine conversation relies on third-party critique. The colleague who complains about the boss, redirect with, "Have you shared this feedback with them?" The friend dissecting a mutual acquaintance's relationship. Try, "I wonder what they'd say if they were here." This isn't about policing speech, it's about reclaiming integrity. As Marcus wrote, the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. When you refuse to traffic in gossip, you become the person others trust instinctively because they know their dignity is safe with you. That's the quiet power of Stoic speech. It doesn't just protect others, it fortifies your own character, one unspoken judgment at a time. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled an empire, wrote in his private journal, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's the Stoic paradox. The busier the world becomes, the more vital it is to cultivate comfort in your own company. Solitude wasn't just a physical state for the Stoics. It was a mental training ground where the noise of others' opinions faded, leaving only the clarity of your own thoughts. Modern life treats being alone like a problem to solve, something to fill with podcasts, playlists, or background TV. But the Stoics saw it differently. Solitude is where you meet yourself without disguise, where the seeds of self-awareness take root. Loneliness aches with absence, but solitude thrives on presence. One is the feeling of being unseen, the other is the practice of seeing yourself clearly. Picture two people on a park bench. One scrolls frantically through messages, craving connection. The other sits still, observing the play of light through leaves, attuned to their own breath. Both are alone, but only one is at peace with it. Seneca, who spent years in exile, wrote letters about turning isolation into introspection. You must withdraw into yourself as far as possible, for you are your own best teacher. His solitude wasn't empty, it was fertile ground for dialogue with his highest self. This distinction matters because we've conflated being alone with being lonely. Research shows that people who fear solitude often struggle with self-reflection, defaulting to distractions to avoid confronting their own minds. The Stoic antidote. Practice: start with micro moments, the 5-minute coffee without your phone, the walk without headphones. Notice the itch to reach for stimulation, then resist it just long enough to ask, "What am I avoiding?" Marcus called this the conversation of the soul with itself, a habit as practical as it was profound. His meditations weren't written for an audience, they were notes to himself, a record of someone continually refining his character in the quiet. Here's the challenge: recall the last time you were truly alone, not just physically, but mentally unoccupied. No screens, no tasks, no mental to-do lists. If it feels unsettling, that's the point. Like a muscle, solitude strengthens with use. The French philosopher Pascal observed, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." The Stoics would add, "Because we fear what we might discover there. But what if that discovery is the very thing we've been seeking?" Tonight, try this. after turning off the lights, lie in the dark for just 3 minutes before sleep claims you. No recounting the day, no planning tomorrow, just stillness. You'll likely feel the urge to grab your phone or chase a thought. Don't let the silence speak. In that space, you might hear something rare, your own voice, undistracted and unhurried. As Marcus reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Solitude isn't the absence of others, it's the presence of yourself, and that's a conversation worth having. Seneca once observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality," a truth that strikes at the heart of why courage isn't just for battlefields, but for the quiet moments when comfort whispers louder than growth. Stoic bravery isn't about grand heroics. It's the daily decision to face what unsettles us, one small act at a time. Picture someone who dreads public speaking, palms sweating as they approach the podium. Their voice trembles, but they speak anyway. That's not just overcoming fear, it's practicing the Stoic discipline of Andrea, the courage to act despite the body's protest. The irony, the more we avoid discomfort, the larger it looms in our minds. Seneca advised, each day do something that scares you, not to seek danger, but to prove to yourself that fear's bark is worse than its bite. Consider the modern workplace, that meeting where you hesitate to share an unconventional idea, or the conversation you postpone because it might be awkward. These are the battlegrounds where Stoic courage is forged. The ancient Stoics trained like athletes for such moments. Musonius Rufus made his students debate in front of crowds to inoculate them against stage fright. Epictetus, who walked with a limp from his time in chains, taught, "It's not what you face, but how you face it." Today's equivalent might be volunteering to lead a presentation or finally asking for that raise. The action itself matters less than the deliberate choice to lean into discomfort rather than retreat. Here's the hidden payoff: courage compounds. Each time you choose the harder path, sending the email you've been overthinking, striking up a conversation with a stranger, you're not just solving that single problem. You're rewiring your brain's threat response. Neuroscientists call this exposure therapy. The Stoics called it wisdom. Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders like, "The obstacle is the way," knowing that growth hides just beyond the edge of our comfort zones. So today, identify one tiny act that makes your pulse quicken. Maybe it's speaking up in a group chat instead of lurking, or finally booking that solo trip you've fantasized about but feared to plan. Don't wait for fear to fade, it won't. As Seneca wrote, fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. Your comfort zone isn't a sanctuary, it's a cage with open doors. Step through and you'll discover what the Stoics knew all along. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the clarity to act in spite of it. That first shaky step. That's where character begins. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into wisdom, left us with a humbling admission. It is impossible to learn that which one thinks one already knows. That single sentence exposes arrogance as the enemy of growth, a wall that blocks the very lessons life tries to teach us. The Stoics didn't preach false modesty or self-deprecation. They practiced radical honesty about the limits of their understanding. Picture two experts in a meeting. One dominates the conversation, dismissing alternate views with polished certainty. The other listens intently, then says, "That's a perspective I hadn't considered. Tell me more." The first leaves the room unchallenged. The second walks away wiser. That's the Stoic distinction between arrogance and quiet confidence. One inflates the ego, while the other expands the mind. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling the Roman Empire, journaled reminders like, "Throw away your books, stop letting yourself be distracted." Not because learning was worthless, but because intellectual humility meant recognizing that true wisdom wasn't found in scrolls alone, but in the willingness to question even his own imperial decrees. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies on the Dunning-Kruger effect show that those with the least competence often overestimate their abilities, while true experts tend to underestimate theirs. The more we learn, the more we grasp how much remains unknown. Here's where humility gets practical. Think of the last time you dug in your heels during an argument, only to realize later you were mistaken. That discomfort you felt wasn't weakness, it was growth knocking. Seneca observed, even the greatest mind will have something to learn from the smallest. The barrister who remembers hundreds of orders might teach you about memory. A child's blunt question could reveal assumptions you've never examined. Humility isn't about diminishing yourself. It's about recognizing that every person you meet holds a piece of knowledge you lack. Try this reframe for one day. Approach conversations as if the other person knows something vital that you don't. Not in a naive, every opinion is equal way, but with the Stoic discipline of separating truth from ego. When a colleague critiques your proposal, resist the defensive script running in your head. Instead, ask, what if they're even 10% right? That tiny opening is where progress slips in. The ultimate test, recall when you last said 3 simple words, I was wrong, not with caveats or qualifiers, but with the clean precision of someone unthreatened by imperfection. For Epictetus, that moment was the birthplace of wisdom. The first sign of a foolish man is that he thinks he knows everything. Your errors aren't failures, they're the friction that sharpens your judgment. The humble mind stays porous, adaptable, and endlessly teachable. And in a world that confuses loudness with leadership, that quiet strength speaks volumes. Marcus Aurelius once scribbled a reminder to himself that cuts through 2,000 years of human distraction. Confine yourself to the present, not to the meeting later, not to the comment you wish you'd made yesterday, but to the single moment unfolding right now. That's Stoic mindfulness in its purest form, not as a trendy meditation hack, but as a radical act of mental sovereignty. Think about how many times today your body was in one place while your mind was somewhere else entirely, replaying an awkward conversation, rehearsing a future scenario, or lost in the endless scroll of a screen. The modern world runs on divided attention, but the Stoics recognized this fragmentation as the enemy of a life fully lived. Consider the last time you ate a meal without checking your phone, or listened to a friend without mentally drafting your response. Chances are those moments felt strangely rich, not because anything extraordinary happened, but because you were actually there to experience them. Neuroscience confirms what the ancients intuited. When we multitask, we don't actually divide our focus. We rapidly switch between tasks, degrading our performance and satisfaction in all of them. The Stoic alternative, prosoch the discipline of attention, not passive zoning out, but active immersion in whatever you're doing, whether it's washing dishes or drafting a proposal. As Epictetus put it, if you seek truth, be present. Here's where it gets practical. That buzzing phone isn't just stealing minutes, it's eroding your capacity for depth. Every notification is a tiny fracture in your concentration, and over time, those cracks widen until sustained focus feels impossible. Marcus Aurelius didn't have social media, but he faced his own distractions, imperial duties, political intrigues, constant demands on his attention. His solution, micro moments of presence. In Meditations, he describes grounding himself in the sensory details around him, the feel of his pen, the sound of birds at dawn, the weight of his cloak. This wasn't poetic musing, it was tactical training for a mind under siege. Try this Stoic breathing exercise next time you catch your thoughts scattering. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, then pause empty for 4. Repeat 3 times. With each cycle, silently name one thing you see, one you hear, and one you feel physically. This isn't about emptying your mind, it's about anchoring it. The goal isn't to eliminate distraction, but to recognize when you've been hijacked and gently guide yourself back. Seneca called this gathering your soul after it's been dispersed by the world's demands. Your challenge today: spend just 5 minutes in uninterrupted focus on one mundane activity: folding laundry, stirring your coffee, walking without headphones. Notice how often your mind tries to bolt like a restless dog. That tug is the habit of distraction fighting back. The Stoics didn't achieve perfect presence either. They practiced it daily, like athletes training for the Olympics of their own attention. As Marcus wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Not as morbid threat, but as urgent reminder. The present is all we ever truly have. Every other moment is either memory or mirage. This breath, this step, this sentence, this is where life happens. The rest is just noise. Seneca warned that lies are like termites. They gnaw silently at the foundation of character until integrity collapses under the slightest pressure. The Stoics didn't view honesty as a moral platitude, but as the bedrock of self-respect. Every time you twist the truth, even with so-called harmless white lies, you're not just deceiving others, you're eroding your own ability to trust yourself. Picture the colleague who claims to love your half-baked idea in a meeting, only to criticize it privately later. The damage isn't just to your project, it's to their own credibility, one polite fiction at a time. Consider the white lies we tell daily, claiming to be 5 minutes away when you haven't left home, or complimenting a meal you barely touched. These might seem trivial, but the Stoics saw them as dangerous rehearsals for self-betrayal. Epictetus framed it bluntly: "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." When you say, "I'm fine," while seething inside, you're not sparing someone's feelings, you're teaching yourself to mute your authentic experience. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show habitual liars experience increased anxiety and decreased self-esteem, not because they're caught, but because they lose touch with their own truth. The Stoic alternative: tactful honesty. Imagine receiving a gift that misses the mark. The reflexive lie, "It's perfect," robs the giver of genuine connection. The Stoic approach: "I'm touched, you thought of me, what made you choose this?" This pivots to appreciation while leaving space for authentic dialogue. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his leadership, insisting advisors speak plain truth rather than flattery. He knew sycophants create weak rulers, just as white lies cultivate fragile relationships. Here's the litmus test. Recall a recent moment when honesty felt risky, maybe admitting a mistake at work or confessing you forgot a commitment. That tension in your chest wasn't just fear of consequences, it was your integrity recognizing a crossroads. The Stoics taught that every uncomfortable truth spoken is a deposit in the bank of self-trust. Withdrawals might feel easier in the moment, but the compound interest of honesty pays lifelong dividends. As Seneca wrote, "A liar's punishment isn't that they aren't believed, but that they can't believe others." Your words don't just describe reality, they shape your capacity to engage with it authentically. Tonight, replay one incident where you defaulted to a white lie. Now mentally rewrite the scene with Stoic candor, not brutal bluntness, but clarity wrapped in kindness. Notice how it alters the emotional weight. That's the paradox of truth-telling. It may unsettle the surface, but it calms the depths. In a world of curated personas and performative niceties, your unvarnished truth becomes your quiet rebellion and your ultimate freedom. Epictetus stood on the shores of the Aegean, watching the tides recede, and offered a simple yet revolutionary instruction. Don't seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do, and you will go on well. That's the essence of amor fati, the love of fate, not passive resignation, but active collaboration with life's inevitable changes. Picture two trees in a storm. One rigidly resists the wind until its branches snap. The other bends, allowing the gusts to pass through its leaves, emerging unscathed when the skies clear. Both faced the same tempest, but only one understood the Stoic secret. Resistance amplifies suffering. Acceptance transforms it into strength. Consider how often we exhaust ourselves battling reality, the cancelled flight, the sudden job transfer, the unexpected illness. The energy spent raging against these changes is like trying to hold back the ocean with bare hands. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome during plague and war, wrote in his private journal, "The obstacle is the way." He wasn't suggesting we enjoy adversity, but that we recognize how wrestling with the unchangeable drains reserves better spent adapting. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on cognitive flexibility show that people who accept unavoidable stressors recover faster than those who dwell on, "Why me?" The pain may be inevitable, but the suffering, that's often a choice. Here's where amor fati diverges from toxic positivity. The Stoics weren't preaching blind optimism. Everything happens for a reason. But clear-eyed pragmatism. When Seneca lost his wealth and was exiled to Corsica, he didn't pretend to love his hut or stale bread. Instead, he wrote, "This is my situation. What can I make of it?" That shift from "this shouldn't be happening" to "this is happening, what's next?" is the pivot point of resilience. Nature offers endless examples. Rivers don't protest when rocks alter their course. They find new paths forward. Think of a change you're currently resisting. Maybe it's a relationship ending, a body aging, or a dream deferred. Now imagine applying Epictetus's tidal wisdom. What if this isn't an interruption of your life, but part of its unfolding? A vineyard's grapes must be crushed to become wine. Caterpillars dissolve before becoming butterflies. The Stoics saw this pattern everywhere: destruction preceding creation, loss making space for renewal. Tonight, try this exercise. List one change you've been fighting, big or small. Next to it, write 3 potential gifts it might carry. The breakup that frees you to rediscover yourself. The failed project that taught you more than success could. Even the traffic jam that gifted you 10 minutes of unexpected stillness. This isn't about denying pain, but discovering the hidden contours of growth within it. As Marcus reminded himself, the universe is change, life is understanding. Your peace lies not in controlling the waves, but in learning to surf them. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal that would one day be called Meditations, not because he intended others to read it, but because he needed to remind himself of this. When you've done well and another has benefited, why seek a third thing, recognition or reward? That question cuts to the heart of Stoic virtue, doing good not as performance, but as practice. Imagine planting a tree in the dead of night where no one will ever see it grow. You'll never sit in its shade or hear others praise its beauty, yet you dig the hole, lower the roots, and water the earth anyway. That's quiet virtue, the kind that leaves no footprint except in the soul of the one who acts. Modern charity often comes with receipts, tax deductions, Instagram stories, donor plaques. There's nothing wrong with public giving, but the Stoics challenge us to examine our motives. Is the goal to alleviate suffering or to be seen as the kind of person who alleviates suffering? Epictetus warned, if you do something noble and another finds out, it's no longer a good deed, it's a transaction. The moment we anticipate credit, the act shifts from service to self-promotion. Consider the difference between a viral fundraiser where names are broadcast and an anonymous donor who pays off school lunch debts quietly. Both help, but only one trains the giver in true detachment. History's most enduring acts of kindness often went unrecorded. the Underground Railroad conductor who risked their life without expecting a footnote in history. The medieval baker who left unmarked loaves at the poorhouse door. These weren't just generous acts, they were spiritual exercises in ego dissolution. Seneca, who gave away much of his wealth anonymously, wrote, "A benefit consists not in what is done, but in the mind of the doer. The moment we attach strings, even invisible ones, of gratitude, our generosity becomes a contract rather than a gift." Here's the paradox: anonymous giving often yields richer rewards than public charity. Without the dopamine hit of praise, you're left with something purer, the quiet joy of having aligned your actions with your values. Marcus called this eudaimonia, the flourishing that comes from virtue alone. Modern science echoes this. Studies show anonymous donors report deeper satisfaction than those who give publicly, precisely because the act isn't diluted by social validation. Tonight, try this experiment. Perform one act of kindness so stealthy that even your left hand doesn't know what your right is doing. Pay for a stranger's coffee and leave before they can thank you. Tape a grocery gift card to a neighbor's door after dark. The discipline lies not in the scale of the gift, but in resisting the urge to claim it. As you walk away unseen, notice the peculiar lightness in your chest. That's the sound of your ego dissolving and your character growing stronger in the silence left behind. The Stoics knew this secret. The highest virtues are those that leave no trace except in the unseen architecture of who you become. As dusk settles and the day's clamor fades, the Stoics practiced a radical act of self-assessment, not tallying accomplishments, but measuring something far more profound: the integrity of their effort. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, laid bare this nightly ritual. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and measure my words and deeds. Notice what's absent from his review: no inventory of wealth gained, no count of compliments received. Only one question mattered: had he lived according to his principles, regardless of outcomes? This is the cornerstone of Stoic contentment, finding peace not in what the world gives you, but in what you gave to the world through your best attempt. Picture two farmers ending their day. One obsesses over the unpredictable rain that ruined his crops, spiraling into frustration over forces beyond his control. The other stands at the edge of his field, noting where he could have planted earlier or watered more diligently, then rests easy knowing he tended each row as best he could with the knowledge he had. Both faced the same hardship, but only the second embodies the Stoic mindset, separating the sweat of his brow from the whims of the weather. Marcus Aurelius framed this dichotomy beautifully. The cucumber is bitter. Then throw it away. There are brambles in the path, then go around. That's all you need to know. In other words, do what you can with what you have, then release attachment to the rest. Modern culture often conflates worth with visible results: promotions secured, pounds lost, likes accumulated. The Stoics proposed an alternative metric: the purity of your striving. That project that failed despite your meticulous planning. In Stoic terms, it's not a defeat but a lesson etched in effort. The awkward conversation where you spoke truth despite trembling hands. That's victory wearing the disguise of discomfort. Epictetus, who endured slavery before teaching philosophy, put it bluntly: if you didn't learn what you hoped today, did you at least resist adding to your ignorance? Sometimes growth isn't about climbing higher, but digging your heels in against the pull of old habits. Tonight, try Seneca's examen with a twist. Light a candle. Marcus Aurelius favored this practice and ask not, "What did I achieve?" but "Where did I show up fully?" Maybe you bit back a sharp comment during a stressful meeting. That's discipline in action. Perhaps you finally started that application you've been avoiding. That's courage taking form. Even the smallest act of integrity counts. Choosing water over wine when tired. listening fully instead of waiting to speak, resisting the easy lie that would have smoothed things over. The Stoic sees these invisible victories as the true bricks building character. There's profound freedom in this approach. When your peace depends solely on your own honest effort rather than fickle external validation, you become unshakable. The critics barb the missed opportunity, the unfair outcome. They lose their power to define you. As Seneca wrote in his final letter, life is neither good nor bad, it's a space for both. What matters is what you bring to it. So as you blow out that candle tonight, do it with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows the deepest contentment isn't found in a perfect day, but in a day perfectly lived, one imperfect effort at a time. So where does this leave us? 30 seemingly small choices, each one a brick in the foundation of your character, each moment of patience, discipline, or kindness another layer of who you're becoming. This is Stoicism in action, not as some abstract philosophy, but as a lived practice where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Every time you pause before reacting, every instance you choose gratitude over complaint, every silent act of integrity when no one's watching, you're not just passing time. You're sculpting your soul with the precision of a master craftsman. The Stoics understood something profound. Transformation doesn't happen in grand declarations, but in the quiet accumulation of daily decisions. Like water shaping stone, not through force but through persistence, your character is carved by what you repeatedly do. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up one day with unshakable resilience. He built it through thousands of mornings choosing discipline over indulgence. Epictetus didn't magically transcend his enslavement. He forged freedom in his mind, decision by decision, long before his chains were removed. Here's the invitation: don't try to overhaul your life overnight. That's a recipe for burnout. Instead, pick just one of these 30 decisions to focus on this week. Maybe it's the evening review where you mine your day for wisdom. Or perhaps it's practicing amor fati, loving whatever life throws at you, even when it's not what you planned. Master that single habit until it becomes second nature, then build from there. As Epictetus reminds us, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Your journey toward self-mastery is no different. It blossoms in the moments you choose courage over comfort, ripens in the days you show up fully even when no one applauds. And if you stumble, good, that means you're human. The Stoics fell short too, that's why they practiced, not perfection but progress, so take a breath. Look back at these 30 decisions and see them for what they are, not a to-do list but a map to your best self. The path isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. As you go forward, carry this final thought from Epictetus. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The gap between those two isn't failure, it's where character is forged. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing. We explore these principles every week, not as ancient history, but as living wisdom for modern challenges. Because the world needs more people who choose integrity over instant gratification, who build inner strength when others are chasing external validation. People like you, now go pick one decision and begin, the rest will follow.